Welcome back to Frederics Mates. Last time we had Max Öve, as we learned correctly how to pronounce this young fellow back then. And now we're talking about your next encounter of one of the world champions. Who is next in the line, Frederic?
Well, actually, he's not. Yes, he's next in line as well. He was the third title player I met in my life. You must imagine, I had met David Levy, who was an IM, and Helmut Pfleger, who's a GM.
Yeah.
I'd never seen or touched or spoken to a title player before.
My God.
And then the third person, they sent me to Moscow to do an interview with him. I was doing a broadcast for German television on computers can now play chess. And Botvinnik was trying to write an intelligent program. So, I went to Moscow, and in the middle of winter, it was 1979, I think, or 80.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a rookie journalist, and I arrived there, and we went to his house, and we started filming. And it was very interesting. First of all, it was a nice 2-bedroom flat or 2-room flat. And we were in the sitting room. It was cozy. He had a fireplace. There was a ledge next to it.
Nice.
And there was bedding on it. And then at some stage, he said to me, let me show you something. And he went to fetch it from the other room. I followed him, and he tried to stop me, but I was there. And it was ice cold. And he saw me shivering. And he said, we only have coal for one room. So, he was very privileged, but he could only heat one room.
Wow.
And
talking about that situation.
Yeah. And then after I did the interview for the television, it was all okay. We sat there for a couple of hours, and he told me stories about everything in chess. He told me about Lasker and what kind of a person he was and his games. And he told me about Capablanca and Aljechin and so on. And I kept signaling to my cameraman, record this for heaven's sake, but he didn't.
Oh, no.
He didn't. Why didn't he? Because we were recording on celluloid,
Oh, gosh.
And
okay.
he couldn't afford it. So, so unfortunately, this is all gone. I'm the only person who heard it. And I try to remember everything he told me.
Excellent, at least that. So what was one of the most significant characteristics of Botvinnik, which you would,
Actually, I didn't, I cannot describe him accurately from that time because it was a chance encounter. It was one afternoon and so on. But a couple of years later, I think it was 1982 or so, that Ken Thompson, the Unix man, computer language C and so on, he had built a chess machine called Bell, and it had achieved master strength. It had won the ACM tournament and so on. And the Russians invited us, the Russian Chess Federation and Botvinnik invited us to Moscow to demonstrate the machine, give a talk and everything. And so I came from Hamburg and Ken came from New Jersey. Mm-hmm. And there's an interesting little story there. Before we departed from Moscow, I called Ken and said, listen, if they put us there, we were put up in the same hotel, but if they switch hotels or something, you leave a note saying where you are, and I will leave a note saying where I am, so we can find each other. Mm-hmm. And if that doesn't succeed, then the next morning at 10 o'clock, we go to the Red Square and we meet there in front of a cathedral, the Basil Cathedral, which looks like a wedding cake. And we stand in front of it and I stand in front of it. So I came to Moscow and of course, Ken wasn't in the hotel. I asked, is there a note for me? And they said, no, never heard. Ken Thompson, never heard. And so, I tried everything. I couldn't find them. Mm-hmm. And the next morning, I had breakfast and I had a accompanying person, I don't know what to call him because he was obviously KGB or something, but a very nice guy. And I said to him, okay, listen, at 10 o'clock, I have to go to the Red Square to meet someone. And he said, no, you can't go there. And I said, come on, listen, I'm free. I've been invited by the Soviet Chess Federation and I can go wherever I want. And he said, no, you can't. And I said, why not?
God.
He said, because there are going to be 1 to 2 million people on the square today. Because today is Gitla Kaput. Gitla Kaput is the celebration day of Russia's, the Soviet Union's victory over Adolf Hitler, over Germany.
Mm-hmm.
And it's called Gitla Kaput. And all the streets were packed and everything. So there was no way I could go there. No way I could find Ken.
Poor Ken, poor you.
Yeah. And then came a very instructive little episode for me. I said to my guide or my companion there, I said, listen, I need to call Botvinnik and find out, because he was coordinating everything, find out where Ken is. And he said, you want me call great world champion Botvinnik? I said, yeah, we're friends, we know each other. And he said, really? Well, actually, I tried to call him, but there was a lady who spoke only Russian. And so I said, you call him.
Yeah.
And he said, me call him? No. I said, we're friends. And he said, okay, what's his father's name? And I said, why are you giving me a hard time? I don't know his father's name. He said, no, I cannot call him. I need to know his father's name. I wondered, I wasn't acquainted with this thing of patronymic. And so he said, wait a minute. And he went outside to a bookshop and he came back and he said, his father's name is Moisei. Okay, now I can call him. And so he called him because, I could call him Mr. Botvinnik or Boris, but Mr. Botvinnik, and you could as a Westerner. But a Russian cannot do that. He has to say, Mikhail Moiseyevich.
Oh.
Mikhail Moiseyevich, I have one Mr. Friedel here who wants to talk to you and so on.
Oh.
And at last we were in contact, and then we found Ken and we got together and so on.
Oh my goodness.
But there was one problem. There was one great problem. Ken was supposed to come with the bell machine. It's the size of a small refrigerator. And it wasn't on the plane. And Botvinnik and I and Ken, he led us into the luggage hold of the plane to search whether they'd overlooked it or something, but it wasn't there.
Oh gosh.
So we came without the computer. And we called home and said, what's happened? Where's the computer? Because Ken went to Newark Airport and he checked in his computer and a little bit of luggage, and he checked in himself. And they confiscated the computer. They held it back because of technology. You weren't allowed to take high caliber technology to Russia.
Still rough times.
And so they didn't come. It didn't come. And in fact, I think there was an arrest warrant against Ken.
Oh my goodness.
When he got back, he would be arrested immediately or something like that. And so we were there without the computer. And the one big lecture was canceled because we were supposed to demonstrate stuff. We didn't have a computer. But we interacted with Botvinnik. We spent the 3 or 4 days with Botvinnik all the time. And we got to see what he was developing. Actually, we didn't. He invited us to his dacha, and his programmers came there, and we all met together. And we said, where's the computer? No, that is in Institute. Can we see it? No, at the moment, it's not possible and so on. But they were willing to describe what they were doing. And they showed us this famous position from Botvinnik against Capablanca
Okay.
in Avro, where he played bishop a3, sacrificing the bishop and winning the game beautifully and so on.
Mhm.
It was very nice. And they showed us how it would play that because it understood the concept. It didn't calculate it at all. It
Mhm.
just understood the concept of mobility and strength and attack and so on. And they were absolutely convinced. And then something interesting happened. Ken said, look, there's a position, Alyechin against Pratt, where Alyechin sacrificed his queen on h5, and Bell almost gets it but doesn't. Do you think your program would get it? And so we set up the position on the board, and they started calculating on paper
Mhm.
and saying, okay, the trajectory of the queen and the mobility of it and so on, and the attacking potential of this piece and that piece and so on, and came to the conclusion it'll solve it in what, I don't know, 10 minutes or something. It'll find it because of all these things.
Uh-huh.
And what I had done is I had removed the pawn on g2, just took it off the board. And without the pawn on g2, the whole thing is, the sacrifice is a catastrophe. You lose, just you lose, you know. But they found it because they knew it was what they were looking for. And I remember how Botvinnik stood there, sat there at the beginning, smiling and with pride, you know, see my programmers, what they're doing and so on.
Mhm.
And then suddenly his smile froze because he saw that I had removed the pawn on g2. And now it was just a mistake, not a brilliant queen sacrifice. And we begged them, you know, show us the program, let us play around with it or something, but no, they couldn't. And
Wow.
so I think it was a bit of a scam. You know, what they were doing was getting a lot of funding from the government and from the Academy of Sciences and
Uh-huh.
so on, and never having anything. And of course, until Botvinnik wrote a book about it, until today, we have never seen the thing play anything except the position of Lasker,
Okay.
of Capablanca, the A3 sacrifice. That's everything they show.
How long did you stay in contact with Botvinnik? Have you always written to each other? Did you always like meet each other every couple of years or?
Yes, yes, yes.
Mhm.
What happened was we would meet at big events. He was always invited as a
Sure.
special guest, and I would go there. And what we did was we shared a common sense of humor. He had a very wry sense of humor, which I appreciated extremely well. And he, I think, liked my humor as well. And he would do things to me like, at one meeting here in Germany, they sat me next to Botvinnik. You know him, you can talk to him and so on. And I was sitting at a dinner next to Botvinnik, and he completely ignored me. He looked away and he was talking to other people and so on, and for like 10 or 15 minutes. And I thought, what have I done? Why is he
Yeah,
being
what
like
did they
this?
tell him? Yeah.
What did they tell him about me or something? And suddenly in a pause in the conversation, he, without looking at me, looking straight ahead, said, "So, Frederic, we meet again. How are you? Tell me," and so on. And he was just, it was a kind of flirting, you know. And this is the kind of person he was, and he did this all the time.
Oh,
And
that's
I need to
awesome.
tell you one more thing, which was
Please.
just remarkable. We met at the ACM tournament in New York. He was guest of honor and everything. And we took him to see a musical. And it was The Chorus Line, which
Mhm.
was a slightly daring musical with lots of girls, lots of legs and everything. And while I was watching it and enjoying it, I thought, is this something for Botvinnik? And I kept looking at him, but he was enjoying it himself. So it was fine. And then we came out of the musical Broadway and late in the evening, and we were walking to the hotel when there was a little table on the side of the pavement
Mhm.
and a black guy sitting behind it with a chessboard on it. And he said, want to play, come, want to play?
One of the first
And
chess
$5
hustlers.
or something. He was a hustler. And we saw this, and Ken said one word. He said, Mikhail. And Botvinnik had walked on, and Ken rushed over to him,
Uh-huh.
caught up with him, and started to discuss. And I stood next to the board, and the hustler was saying to me, want to play? Come on, make your move, and $5 and so on. I said, no, we're trying to get the old man there to play a game. And he said, and then Ken came to me and said, no, he won't do it because it's too dark and he's a little bit scared and nervous.
Oh.
And so I said, okay, sorry. And he said, sorry. I said, yeah, you're lucky, you know. And he said, me lucky? I'm an FM. Do you understand what that is? And I'm not afraid of no old man. And I said, I think you would be afraid of this one. And then we walked on. And then about a few minutes later, suddenly this black guy jumps out of the bushes. He had followed us and stands in front of us and says, I know who you are. You are Mikhail Botvinnik. And Mikhail said, yes, I am. And he says, Botvinnik. And he used some expletives about it. And then he pulled out a $20 note and says, please sign this for me. I will never spend it. And Botvinnik signed the $20 note. And this guy was so proud. I actually met the great Botvinnik. So it was fun, you know. And I had a lot of encounters like this. And this was typical, you know, it happened in different circumstances, different things happened, which were always just entertaining and fun. And the main thing was I got to know such a lot about chess because I was talking to history of the first half of or the middle of the last century. And so this was very important for me.
Absolutely. What nice encounters with such, well, not only Botvinnik was a special character, of course. I mean, almost everybody you met who has some significance in chess is a bit of a special character, but you're also like, I guess, I mean, I know already because I've been out with you too a couple of times. It's always entertaining and fun, and I cannot stop listening to your stories. One last question to Botvinnik. Do you remember when it was the last time you were talking with him?
I think at some event here in Europe, not in America, but in Europe. And he was already frail and so on.
Yeah.
And I was very sad when he suddenly passed away. I spoke to him a number of times at his Botvinnik school because Gary
Yes.
Kasparov, who was a great friend of mine, was attending and no, not attending. He was actually helping Botvinnik run the school.
Yeah.
So they would call me and there again, we'd have a lot of fun.
Nice.
You know, once I gave Gary a problem. The game starts with 1e4 and ends in the fifth move with knight takes rook mate. Can you reconstruct the game? And he worked on it and worked on it. He couldn't. And then he gave it to his students at the Botvinnik school, and they couldn't find the solution.
Oh, it's
and so he
tricky.
called me and he said, you're dead. The problem doesn't work.
Sorry.
This is Gary, yeah? Tell me the solution. I said, first you have to get down on your knees and say, I, the great Gary Kasparov, was not able to solve Frederick's problem. And he said, come on, I'm sitting here with Botvinnik. I cannot go get down on my knees and say things like that. And so I dictated the solution. I heard Botvinnik draw breath in the background. Like this, you know, because he had also been working at it. It's a very insidious little problem.
Oh,
1e4
goodness.
and the fifth move, knight takes rook mate.
Oh
Try and
my
reconstruct
goodness.
that. It's just crazy.
You at home heard it first. So, yeah, you can definitely give us your solution if you want to, of course. I'm very curious about this. And obviously, all of this and so many more stories you will all be able to read starting probably in October. And there will be an English translation of the new book of Professor Christian Hesse and, of course, Frederic Friedel. So you will be able to read all of those encounters and many other anecdotes in this lovely piece of book. I am looking forward to looking at this. And soon enough, we will talk about one of the next encounters of Frederic's mates. Thanks for watching. Thank you, Frederic. Bye
You're
bye.
welcome. Goodbye.